Our guest today is Robert W. Sanborn, the 137th Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Michigan. He served Michigan in 1982 and 1983. Hello, Bob. How are you doing?
Oh, John.
One of my thoughts about you is frequently that you live in Clio. You're a lifelong resident. I'll say that again. When I think of you, I think of the fact that you're from Clio. I know you're a lifelong resident of Genesee County, and I suspect that a lot of people don't really know how to pronounce Clio when they see it.
We have found, particularly in my Grand Lodge travels, that quite often people would say, "Oh, you're from Clio." And I says, "No, we're from Clio." Or they would apologize for pronouncing it incorrectly. But I come back with a comment, "Well, do you know how to pronounce Ohio?" And it's Ohio, not Ohio. And been pointed out also about Mayo and Mio. So anyhow, it's Clio, and we quite often refer to it as CL10.
Now that you've given me other options, I think I'll become confused. But tell us about your mom and dad, your growing up.
Well, Mom and Dad, I was the third of 7 children, and I had a brother and sister older, and the siblings below me, I was number 3. And we were, all but myself, were born in Clio. And it happened to be during my birth, my parents had moved to Geneseeville, which is a neighboring community, and lived there 6 months, and then they moved back to Clio. And we had, our family was raised in the town, in the city, not in the farm, but we had a small house that Dad and Mother provided our shelter.
Now, you were born and a child during those economically dark days of the Great Depression, although you were very young. Do you have recollections of how that affected your family?
I sure do. My dad was employed at the time, I think, with General Motors. He had what they called a shop. At the time they called it a shop, a factory job. And he struggled. I was born in '29 and had 2 older, a brother and a sister older. And I didn't realize, I don't think, too much until I became maybe 5 or 6 years old, when Mother would send me over town, which was just a block away, to the grocery store and to get a loaf of bread or a quart of milk, and she would say, "You tell Julius, who was the owner of the store, to put it on the bill, and Dad'll settle up at payday."
You don't tell them that anymore.
You don't tell them that anymore.
No. Did you grow up with family in the area, uncles or that sort of thing?
Yes, we had, my dad was an only child, and so he had no brothers or sisters, and but my mother had 2 brothers that both lived in the area, an Uncle Leo and a Uncle Hazen. And in fact, Uncle Hazen did live with us for a period of time before he was married.
I presume Clio had its own public schools, and you are a product of that?
I went to kindergarten in Clio. We walked to school, and in fact, they never had buses until I think the year that Donna graduated in '49 was the first year that they had school transportation. So yes, I walked to school every day.
Were you a good student?
Well, I would like to think that I was a pretty good student. I had good marks through my grade school and had fairly good marks through my high school. I do remember one instance that I had a disagreement with my English teacher, and she come out ahead. She gave me a D on one of my exams, and that particular D that I received kept me from being an honor student at graduation time in 1947. So it was just one of those things. She was right and I was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Were you active in extracurricular activities, sports in school?
I played basketball through my high school years, and I was more of a bench rider than I was a starter or a regular player. However, I did try football. At the time, I was a freshman, and I was what they called at that time a 90-pound weakling. I weighed 90 pounds. The fellow that I lined up against on the line weighed 250. And so you can imagine what my football career amounted to in high school. Not very long did I survive.
Something had to give.
Something had to give.
And that was you.
Yes, it was.
We'll come back in a moment to what you did after school, but jumping a bit forward to 1950, that was one of your landmark years when you married. Tell us about meeting your wife and that.
I had my eye on Donna when I was in my senior year, and she was a sophomore at Clio, and but I never really had I couldn't get up the nerve to ask her for a date. And it happens to be that she asked me to go to a Sadie Hawkins dance.
Classic.
And so, yes, I accepted and was glad of it. And from that time forward, we dated quite regularly. And later, of course, in April of 1950, we were married. So we dated for a period of a couple of years.
In a small town, everybody knows everybody. I grew up in one. So you knew her family probably, at least your parents might have been acquainted.
Yeah, as parents, we did not. They lived out in the country on the farm. Donna's parents were farmers, and my people, or my mother and father, of course, lived in the city. So we did not really get acquainted until the two of us began dating.
And the rest is history, as they say.
The rest is history.
And today you have 4 grown children.
We have 4 grown children. We have 3 boys and a girl. The oldest one lives in Montrose, which is right next door to Clio. And we have a daughter in North Carolina, a son in Oklahoma, and a son in Ohio, all gainfully employed.
One of your involvements, if that's not too small a word, for many years has been with the Bethany United Methodist Church and its board. Tell us about that.
Back in the early 50s, we had 2 Methodist churches in Clio. One was on the corner of Mill and Johnson, the other one on the corner of Mill and Young, just a block apart. And for many years, those 2 churches existed. In 1958, a motion was made by both congregations to try to form one church, and the boards of the 2 churches agreed, and we became one, the Bethany Methodist Church, in 1958. And I was fortunate enough to be active in the church and did serve in the capacity of chairman of the administrative board at one period of time, as chairman of the board of trustees. I got real active in the church and became a part of the Sunday school and the ushers, and it just kept busy in my church.
Methodism has moved with the times, I know. Is your congregations still quite active or large?
We have a very active congregation, and I think that somewhat the The size of the congregation has kind of been status quo. It really hasn't grown all that much, but we do maintain a sizable membership. And I think, and I'm not sure of the numbers, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 members.
Ah, yeah. Another of your civic activities revolves around the fact that Clio is in Vienna Township, and you've been active in the township and with its board. Tell us about that, please.
My first activity as far as township service goes was with the Clio Area Fire Department, and I was a volunteer fireman for 25 years, rising up through the ranks, and spent the last 4 years as chief of my department.
Wow.
Very proud of my volunteer fire service. Had the opportunity to put on a second station during my tenure as chief, and we currently have about 60 volunteer firemen with about 10 pieces of top-notch equipment. And in fact, just as an interesting sidelight, I got a call this week, and the current chief asked if I would serve as a Grand Marshal in our local homecoming parade, which is next Thursday.
How wonderful. How wonderful. You've also been very involved with 3 sons, I believe, in scouting.
We had 3 sons. All were in scouting. The oldest one went on and became an Eagle Scout, and his 2 sons, he has 2 sons, are both Eagle Scouts. The other 2 boys didn't go to the top. They became Life, I believe. But over the years, with 3 boys, you got to be involved with scouting.
Did you get involved in their camping activities?
Got involved in camping, went to Camp Topeka, and the one that is up north, up near Sheboygan. I not remember the name of that one, but I can remember very well going to one of those outdoor winter retreats and sleeping on a slab of cement in a bag trying to keep warm. Yes, I very well remember my scouting days.
The joys of scouting.
Right.
Right. Let's talk about your career. I said that after high school you started doing other things besides the civic involvements, of course. And in 1948 you actually started your own business.
That is correct. I worked for a company in Clio during my high school years, and I had the idea that one day I wanted to have my own gas station. Now, a gas station today is more of a party store, but a gas station where you could pump gas and change tires and change oil and those things. So a small station, a very small station, became available up north of Clio, just half a mile north of the city limits. And I spoke to the distributor there in town, a Sunoco distributor, and asked if I was going to rent that station. I could not buy it, but if I was going to rent it, would he supply me with product? And so we made a deal. And in June of '48, I started in business, and will you believe this now? I had my $35 paycheck. I was making $35 a week at that time. And I had $105 worth of merchandise on consignment that I started my business with. The 105, I think the $5 was maybe changed, $100 worth of merchandise, and my $35 paycheck, and that's how I started in business in 1948.
And the astounding thing neither of us mentioned was in 1948, you were just 19 years old.
I was 19 years old, that's right.
Was it all enthusiasm, or was there some trepidation mixed in there?
Well, probably a little bit of both.
I believe it.
But it was a very successful venture. I later, 4 years later, in 1952, I had the opportunity to become the wholesale distributor of Standard Oil products in Clio, serving North Genesee County. And my dad at the time was employed downtown at the station where I had been employed. And so we made a deal. I turned the gas station over to him, and he ran it for a couple of years as a Sunoco station. And then in 1954, we built a new station, and it became Standard Oil Products. I supplied the products to the station, and Dad and Mother operated that station, the new station, for quite a period of time.
And if I'm not mistaken, in the distributorship, you were not alone in the management of that.
Definitely not alone. I had a partner and still have her today. But we started in 1952, September the 2nd, 1952. Remember that date very well. And at that time, most Standard Oil distributors, the office was rent out of the home. And I had Donna as my secretary. She was the mother of our children. Our first child was born just, let's see, May to September, just 4 months prior to the time I changed vocations, you might say, jobs, with a brand new baby, and we run the office out of our home. So she not only took care of the office, answered the phone, but she took care of the children, and she did that for some 23 years. We had our office in the home before we actually moved to an office downtown and hired a secretary. But she definitely has been my pillar of strength.
In those early days running the business out of the home and with the children arriving and growing up, it must have had its hectic moments, but I'm sure today it's the good old days when you look back on it.
Yeah, it sure is. But I can remember Donna saying about the time that the phone would ring, and we didn't have, of course, portaphones of the day. You had to go to a cord phone, and she would have the baby in her arms or just into the tub, and have to take him out of the tub and run to the phone and answer it and write down the order, and then somehow get the order to me or one of my drivers. So yes, it was a hectic situation for a number of years. And all of our children, we had the 4 in a 10-year period. So that was a busy 10 years particularly for Donna.
I'm sure it was. As time went on and you anticipated retirement, you couldn't see yourself sitting still, so you told me that you took on a license for a retirement business.
I had an idea that when I gave up my Standard Oil distributorship, that I really didn't want to quit. So I went to school and secured my real estate license. And I sold real estate part-time for 10 years while I was still operating the distributorship. And but then after I did retire, I decided that real estate really wasn't what I was interested in. But I did have another 10-year commitment that I had done, and really enjoyed it because I enjoyed children. I substituted as a school bus driver for 10 years for the Clio area schools, and I might get called 2 or 3 times a week, and maybe I wouldn't get called again for a couple of weeks. But I enjoyed the 10 years that I did substitute as a school bus driver.
Interesting.
I could do that certain times a year in the busy time, which was winter time for us. I didn't do so much, but spring and fall, I substitute, enjoyed the work.
That has to kind of parallel being a volunteer fireman. When that horn would go off, you had to move right then. And you mentioned that it went off more than once during a lodge meeting.
Oh, many, many times. Our fire hall at the time was just a block and a half away from the fire hall. So when the whistle blew, I exited not in the normal manner, John. You know, there is a proper way to exit your lodge meeting, but it was understood amongst the brothers that when the fire whistle blew, I left. And I would run from the, I wouldn't drive, I'd run from the lodge to the fire hall. And quite often would get there in time to make the truck.
Another aspect of your phasing out of business and into retirement was that you became a snowbird. Tell us about your better climate.
In 1984, we made our first trip as a snowbird to Arizona. And we went out there and stayed a month, and then enjoyed the winter sunshine out there. And we have been doing that now since 1984, splitting our time between Arizona and Florida, and most recently kind of settled into Arizona. The sunshine agrees with Donna, and we get lots of it in Arizona.
And you still love it.
And we still love it, yes.
You have beat the system.
Yes.
Let's talk about your Masonic career, and starting at the local level. You were precocious then, because the numbers show that you joined Vienna Lodge when you were just 21. Why so young? What was your motivation?
Well, the man who became our, who was in fact the best man at our wedding, had become a Mason, and he was about to go into the service, and he asked if I was interested in becoming a Mason. And of course, knowing that Norm was a good man and a good Mason, I certainly decided that that would work for me also. And so the night before he was to go into the service, he took my petition to the lodge, and that was in September of 1950, and I got my entered apprentice degree in October of 1950.
What are your impressions, your memories today of what Clio Lodge was like back then? More along the line of how did you react to this whole new world that opened to you?
I think the first thing that really was a question for me was when I walked up the stairs. Our lodge was, as I've spoken before, downtown, and as I walked up those steps to receive my entered apprentice degree, I saw a dozen men, some of whom I knew, all with little white aprons on. And I couldn't really figure out what was going on. I thought maybe there was a banquet of some kind going on, but I don't believe there was. This was an entered apprentice degree, but they all had little white aprons, and I later learned, as did you, what that white apron was all about and what it stood for. And that ceremony and the entered apprentice degree, the apron ceremony, is one of the most impressive ceremonies in my Masonic career.
How did you begin to get involved in the lodge?
I wanted to become an officer. I wanted to serve as master of that lodge someday. Now, I'm the only, I had no previous relatives that I was aware of that were Masons. And so I guess was the first one in our immediate family to join the Masonic Lodge. And when I saw that man sitting up there in the east with that top hat on, to me that was very, very impressive. I said, someday I want to sit there in that position. And in 1957, I was installed as a master of my lodge and served during the 1958 time period.
After that, was there ever a period in your life, due to family or business or whatever, that you weren't active in the lodge?
Never. In fact, for 33 years I was an officer in my lodge, and my youngest son, chose to join the lodge, our lodge, Vienna Lodge, the year that I was Grand Master. And he did join, and in fact he presented the petition to me at the reception that the local lodge held for me. And he said, "Here, Dad, is my petition to join your lodge." And he later went on and served as master of our lodge in 1989.
And with that early start, you were Worshipful Master of Vienna Lodge in 1958 at age 29, still right. Almost wet behind the ears. Yeah. Do you have some memories of your year as master?
Yes, I have a very vivid memory, in fact a very sad memory, but it was during my year as master of my lodge that my father passed away. In fact, it was on the lodge night. It was the 15th of April 1958. I was scheduled to be in lodge that night, of course, and got the word from the hospital that Dad was about gone. And so we missed the lodge naturally, but I missed my dad. He did receive his entered apprentice degree the year that I was master. In January of 1958, I initiated he and my younger brother, and Dad suffered a heart attack in January shortly a couple of weeks after he was initiated. And in fact, it was at a fire. He was assistant chief at the time of the Clio Fire Department, and he and I were at a fire. I being just promoted to driver from fireman, and he was the officer on the fire, and he got too much smoke inhalation, and he come out of the fire and sat down on the running board of the truck that I was operating, and he said, "Bob, I don't feel very good." And he did suffer a heart attack, and he passed away 3 months later.
Wow. That loss would certainly color your experience.
That was a very, very important part of my year as master. But we had a good year. I think we raised 13 Master Masons that year, and we were busy, and still are quite busy in Vienna Lodge.
Now, were you master still in the old temple downtown? Or?
I was master in the old temple. We didn't build a new temple in 1969.
Tell us about that.
Well, I remember that very vividly. We bought 3.5 acres north of town, and with 2 houses on the property. When we moved into the new building, it's all on one floor. The east is in the east, and we constructed it that way. We had the Grand Lodge out and dedicated in October of 1969, and by the way, our own past Grand Master Polson at the time was Grand Marshal, and I can see John right now marching up from the parking lot to the place of dedication of that new temple in October of 1969.
Sure. As you continued active, and getting an early start, you received lifetime membership from the lodge in 1991. which has been a few years ago now. And today you also, as of last year, you are proud to hold 60-year membership in Vienna Lodge.
Interesting you should say that. I can remember my life membership, 40 years in Masonry. And by the way, you earn, and you know that, John, you earn your 40 years. You may get your life membership, and you may not, depending on
it's not an entitlement.
On the lodge. It's not. It's not a sure thing. But yes, I did get my 40-year. Our own Walt Wheeler was out when the lodge honored me with my 50-year membership award. And then just in Arizona here last year, Walt was there when they gave me my 60-year award. And so I said to Walt, okay, Walt, the next one is 70. He says, I'll be there. I said, I sure hope so. I sure hope I'm there too.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. One of the options available to Master Masons is the York Rite of Freemasonry, and you've availed yourself of that. Would you share that with us?
I belong to the 3 York Rite bodies. I apologize to the York Rite bodies for not being active, but my tenure is active in the Blue Lodge and the Grand Lodge prior to the time that I was elected to the Grand Lodge line. Had primarily works with the Grand Lodge, and so although I support them and still support them today, I have not been real active. I did receive through the York Rite the Purple Cross, of which I'm very proud of, and but like I said earlier, I'm sorry that I was not able to spend more time with the York Rite bodies.
And likewise, you have joined the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, and you have achieved distinction there.
I was invited to join the Scottish Rite bodies by Jerry Potts. I don't know whether you remember Jerry Potts or not, but he's an active member of Saginaw Lodge number 77 and very active in the consistory. And I was invited to join, and so I did take membership, and I believe it was in about 1972, somewhere in that neighborhood, and there again was not active as Scottish Rite Mason other than attending their reunions until after I finished my term as Grand Master. And then I went on and got active in the consistory line and served as Commander-in-Chief during the 1997-99 time period, a 2-year stint.
And you have received the 33rd degree.
And in 91, I did receive my 33rd degree, yes.
And back about that same time, after you had joined the Scottish Rite, you began to hear the siren song of the Grand Lodge, I believe, in the form of the Board of General Purposes.
Prior to my being elected Grand Marshal in 1976, I served as a member of the Board of General Purposes for a period of 7 years, serving as president of that board in 1974.
That's a considerable responsibility.
It was a job, but there again, I saw as an opportunity and a challenge, and so when I accepted the job as a member of the Board of General Purposes, I thought that attaining the office of president was within reach.
A lot of time, a lot of travel, a lot of telephone calls.
A lot of time and a lot of travel and different cars over the period of 20 years that I was active in the Grand Lodge, many miles.
But working with the diversity of people and personalities was a great reward, I'm sure.
That is the reward, and I've often said, and you hit it right on the nail, is the friendships that you make in your years of Masonry is your reward for the time and service that you spend towards the opportunity.
One of the perhaps lesser known branches of our fraternity is the High 12 International, which is a form of a Rotary Club for Masons, I've always said, but it's a luncheon club, not only with speakers, but with purpose in the form of some charity. Tell us about your involvement there.
It's as you mentioned on the former, it's a luncheon, usually at a luncheon. Some High 12s do meet in the evening, but most of them meet at High 12 for lunch. And I became involved with the High 12 originally in Traverse City. I was invited to join the Cherryland High 12 Club in Traverse City. And you say, why Traverse City? Well, we happen to have a cottage at Higgins Lake, and which is about an hour away from Traverse City. The brothers up there knew that I come to the cottage on a regular basis, and so they invited me to join. And then later, the opportunity came for Flint to start a High 12 club, and I don't know why they picked me, but anyhow, I was invited to be the charter president of the Vehicle City High 12 Club number 673, and I accepted that challenge, and it worked well, and I still belong, and I really need to get back and get more active in High 12 because there again, a lot of good people.
Do you still have the cottage at Higgins Lake, and is it still a getaway for you in the summer?
We still have the cottage at Higgins Lake. It's getting more of a chore as you get older to take care of it. Yes, we do have and it is on the water, and we do enjoy it. We were up here just this last holiday and spent 4 or 5 days up there, and we do enjoy getting away.
I know you have what would amount to a wall full of honorary memberships in Masonic and other organizations, and if you looked at that list, the one that kind of doesn't fit would be Salyersville, Kentucky Lodge number 769, and you're a Kentucky colonel up here in Michigan. Tell us about that.
Very, very proud of the fact of my honorary membership in Salyersville number 769 in Salyersville, Kentucky. I got an invite to go down to an outdoor degree. I think it was 35 years ago, and we have been going down there on a regular basis. I haven't missed a year in 35 years to their outdoor degree, and here, I'm not sure, 15, 20 years ago, they granted me an honorary membership in Salyersville, Kentucky, and I prize that honorary membership as I do the other. I think I have 13 honorary memberships here in Michigan, but yes, you know, to be an honorary member is really something out of the ordinary. Your brothers have to choose you to become one of them. It isn't something that you ask for. And if they think enough of you to grant you that honorary membership, then that is a valued honor.
They are few and far between. Let's talk about your years in the Grand Lodge line. You entered the Grand Lodge as Grand Marshal in 1976, which was a very busy year because it was not only the nation's bicentennial, but it was also the sesquicentennial, 150 years of Michigan Masonry. Talk about that.
Being a novice in the Grand Lodge line, the new kid on the block, so to call, I just was not too sure what I was getting myself in for. But through the leadership of the Grand Lodge officers, and particularly John Polson, who was the outgoing Grand Master, I served that year. Part of the year, of course, John had as Grand Master, and then his successor, Vince Vatter, carried forth, and All I can say, it was a busy year. I probably didn't know what I was doing half the time, but I did survive, and they did elect me the following year as a junior Grand Deacon.
Looking back, I have a short list of the men that you served under who all went on to be Grand Master as you worked your way up that ladder of the Grand Lodge. And sadly, only one of those is still with us today. But names like Ron Schwartz, Holmes Swenson, Charles Moulthrop, Robert Osborne, Carl Warfel. Talk to us a bit about some of those men.
I think the first one that you mentioned there and is still with us is Charlie Moulthrop, and I remember Charlie particularly because we would get an annual report, at least an annual, and quite often other reports of his sailing days on the Great Lakes when Charlie would pilot his own boat from Port Huron to Mackinac in a race. And so it was always very interesting to hear Charlie's report on his activities in the boating world. And then as we move up or down the line, I may not have them in order, but Ron Schwartz certainly remember Ron is the you know his stature. He's short and stocky, but Ron was a good Grand Master, and I was impressed because he invited Don and I as junior officers. I was a junior Grand Deacon at the time. To go to Florida with him on a visitation. It was when the Grand Masters would visit, they quite often would take a junior officer with them, and Ron chose me, and chose Donna and I should say. And I was very thankful for the opportunity to visit my first Grand Lodge as a junior officer. And the same went for Bob Osborne. He did invite Don and I to go to Illinois with him in Isa May on a visitation, and it makes you feel pretty good when the Grand Master will come to a junior officer, particularly down the line a ways, and say, would you like to go with us to the Grand Lodge? And I do remember Holmes Swenson, and that's when I got called on the carpet. We were invited to an OES function in Southfield, Michigan. And being a junior officer, I really was not too, or didn't pay attention, I don't know which, but I was not properly dressed. I think I had a sport coat and a tie on, not a suit. And I was, for want of a different word, sent home because I was not properly dressed. I do remember that situation. But he was proper, he was right, I was wrong.
The Grand Lodge was and continues to be a bastion of propriety.
That's correct.
There's another name that was not one in that particular group. He was already a long time past Grand Master, but it was the Grand Secretary, Royce E. Curlis from the Sioux. I think anyone would admit, including himself, was a colorful figure in Masonry. And you were under his tenure as Grand Secretary throughout your career, I believe, in the Grand Lodge.
Yes, I was.
Tell us about Royce Curlis.
When I first became a Grand Lodge officer in 1976, I really didn't know how to take Royce Curlis, and I'm sure I was not alone in that respect, because Royce told it like it was, and like it is, and like it should be. There was no question when you talk with Royce Curlis about which direction things should or would be going, because he was very insistent that it be done in the manner, and in most cases, I will say that it should be done. But he was a good Grand Secretary. I do remember particularly the year that we were that I was Grand Master, and we had quite a bit of contact with Brother Royce in regards to the different functions, particularly the Grand Lodge session and the Grand Lodge or the Grand Master's reception. And he was very helpful, but he was also, he did not hesitate to praise you if things went well. And he did in different occasions congratulate Donna and I, and particularly our chairman, Jim, our general chairman of the Grand Lodge, and of a reception that we held in Flint at the hotel, and for their excellent handling of Grand Lodge arrangements, and for those people that have done that job in the past, they know what I'm speaking about.
Could you give us an example? Does something leap out in your mind about vintage Royce Curlis, where he expressed himself to the group at Grand Lodge or otherwise?
Of a particular note, John, I don't think I can, other than, like I say, and these may not be the right words, but it's my way or the highway type. But he had great respect.
Yes, he did.
From many, many people.
Yeah.
And I can remember traveling to Bethel Lodge in Sault Ste. Marie when they honored Royce Curlis. And I can remember crossing the bridge at the Straits of Mackinac, and we were the last car admitted to cross that bridge because the winds were blowing so hard that they closed the bridge for a period of time. It was real stormy, but we went up there to honor Brother Royce, and I would do it again anytime.
I have another list here of the men who served under you as Grand Master, and they all continued through the line. Happily, the majority of them, I believe, are still with us, but names like Russell Wells of West Bloomfield, Henry Wilson of Grosse Pointe Park, Richard Sands of Ann Arbor, Ernie Hoffman from Battle Creek, Don Hemming in Traverse City, and Kenneth Bolton of Rochester. Talk to us about your line.
The two brothers that are deceased, of course, we missed very much. Ernie Hoffman and Don Hemming were both good officers and good Grand Masters. They served the lodge. They served my line well, and they served the Grand Lodge well. Brother Russell Wells, I visited him in Arizona this winter. Russ is not real well. He has his problems, but we did have dinner. He and Shirley and Donna and I had dinner together one evening, and renewed old times. I've been in touch with him since we've returned home, and he's got some procedure, I believe, that's going to be done here shortly within the next month. Henry Wilson lives in Scottsdale. I attended lodge with Henry a couple of times or three out there in Arizona. He's very active in his lodge out there. He belongs to Scottsdale Lodge. Very active. I don't think he misses, and they have lodge every Thursday, and he's there. Richard Sands, I spent just recently Grand Lodge with Dick Sands, and we had a conversation. In fact, had I think lunch together. But Dick and Mary, very active, was good officer, and Ken Bolton, a little disappointed in Ken. We've got to get him back to Grand Lodge if he's going to read this interview. Ken, I want to see you at Grand Lodge. It's time you and get back up here and renew old acquaintance. He was my Grand Marshal.
We miss his British accent.
Yeah, I had occasion, different times, that said, Ken, would you just speak English so we can understand, you know? And that was kind of a...
When you became Grand Master, there were 115,000 Masons in Michigan. more than 3 times today's count, and they were in 540 lodges. What comes to your mind when you look at the stats today and that change?
Disappointing to say the least of the amount of lodges in the membership, which we are currently 37,000. And I think there are a number of reasons, but the first and foremost, I think, is the fact that we do not solicit membership. I had a talk that I gave several times during my year as Grand Master, and the title of the talk was Solicitation or No Solicitation, and it leaned towards solicitation. Now, that was not really a popular opinion to have through many, particularly old-timers, and I consider myself today an old-timer, but I still believe that we have the wrong approach. I believe that we should be able to ask a person to join Masonry and be selective, of course, not just anyone, but be selective, of course. But I think we could help in those manners in attaining some good Masons. I had, during my year as Grand Master, a couple of programs that I instituted and have survived the tale of time, and that was the wearing of a pin on your lapel. I had a saying during my year as Grand Master: put a square and compasses on your lapel and don't leave home without it. Now, I borrowed that from the American Express. They used to have something like that, something, so I modified it and said, put a square and compasses on your lapel and don't leave home without it. The other one, and since that time, this pin has continued to grow every year, and I hope it continues to grow. The other one was I instituted the Mason of the Year award, and the purpose of that Mason year was twofold. First off, that you honor a Mason in your local lodge, and then he could go on and become District Mason of the Year, and then would qualify also for the State Mason of the Year program. And the reason for that was mainly on the local level, to let people know in the community that Brother Steve was a Master Mason, and his lodge honored him by making him Master or Mason of the Year in Vienna Lodge. And this carried out throughout the state. There again, give exposure to Masonry to the public. And the dinner that they were to have was to be public. It wasn't going to be just a lodge dinner. You would invite the public to the dinner and to see what type of a man was Mason of the Year. Went on to become District Mason, and of course the State Mason of the Year program that, by the way, this next year will be the 30th anniversary of that program. And those were all to encourage people to be exposed to Masonry.
There were other accomplishments during your year, one of which was the dedication of a statue on the State Capitol complex in Lansing, on the grounds there. Talk about that.
We have an invitation to go to the Lewis Cass building, and I don't really, yeah, that was in 1980. I don't know if it was 82 or 83. I don't remember whether it was beginning of my term or towards the end. But anyhow, to go over and lay, well, I don't think it was lay a cornerstone. I believe it was just to dedication of the statue of George Washington on the Lewis Cass property. And it was a highlight, one of the highlights certainly of my year as Grand Master. We have the Sovereign Grand Commander Maxwell there from Lexington who spoke, and the Lieutenant Governor from Michigan, and I don't recall his name, he was there, and we had lodges from all over the state. We had a big parade. We had a marching parade. Kind of reminds you of back in the days when you look about the temple down in Detroit, when you see those massive people marching up Cass Avenue or Temple Avenue. We had that type of parade in Lansing. Had a very, very nice crowd, and it was one of the highlights of my Masonic year.
The record shows there were some 2,000 who marched in that parade.
2,000, I had forgotten that.
You also turned the first sod of ground for the first major expansion of the Michigan Masonic Home in Alma, a $5 million wing and renovation of half of the existing rooms. And that was in 1983, just before your Grand Lodge session.
Just before it, and I can remember the pictures taken. In fact, I still have the white hard hat, you know, that they give all construction people with our shovels, the Grand Lodge officers, my Grand Lodge officers, and myself, a picture of us in our hard hats turning some soil for that big expansion up at the home. Yes, we had quite a busy year.
I'd like to ask you a few general questions before we close. One of them is, everyone in their Masonic career has had one or more people that they consider a mentor. Would you speak about that?
I had many mentors, I believe, but I think particularly of three. And the first one is Will Adams, who was Grand Master in 74, 75. I, at the time, served as President of the Board of General Purposes, and as all past Grand Masters know, you work, or past presidents of the board, you work very closely with the Grand Master throughout the year. And so I looked up to Will Adams as certainly one of my early mentors. And then I think of John Polson, who I highly respect and still look up to as one of my mentors, because he was the Grand Master that was presiding when I was elected Grand Marshal, and I was impressed with the detail that he would work through the Grand Lodge. And so, yes, Brother Will Adams and Brother John Polson I considered to be very important people in my Masonic career.
Another of our past Grand Masters has been known to say that Masonry can be a life-changing experience. Why do you feel that Masonry is important in the life of a man?
I first became involved in Masonry after I became involved in my church, and after I became a family man. And I found that the three work together. Your family, your church, and your Masonry are welded together like this. They intertwine. If you believe in family and if you believe in church, then Masonry is going to be a part of that intertwining. And my involvement, I think, in the church really probably led me to Masonry, and not vice versa. I think my church activities led me to Masonry, and of course the leading factor has been my wife Donna.
Perhaps in addition to that, why do you feel that Masonry is relevant in today's world?
I guess it's got to be relevant if you have a belief in a supreme being. I guess I don't know if I can get any plainer than that, but if you believe in a supreme being, then Masonry has got to be irrelevant in your life.
Do you feel that there are things that lodges should be doing today that they're not doing?
Other than what I spoke about earlier, I think if you know of a good man that should be a Mason, somehow you should get to him and get the message that we would like him to become. And I'm not at liberty to say right at this moment, but we just recently had a man petition our lodge that I'm just tickled to death that he will become a Mason in the not too distant future.
We appreciate your candor on the solicitation issue. What advice would you have today for an eager young lodge officer on the local level or a worshipful master?
The young Mason that's starting in the line, I think the biggest thing that I could counsel him in is that, do you have the time to become a officer in your lodge? And particularly, do you have the time to become master of your lodge? Yes, it's all attainable, but it does take time, and it does take time away from your family. There are occasions when there's going to be interference, and you've got to be a good judge of where you spend your time. You certainly can't spend it all with Masonry if there are family obligations that you need to attend to. In the same respect, you do have an obligation to your lodge as an officer to be at certain functions when it's necessary. So it's a fine line, and you as an individual have got to walk that line and keep both parties happy.
Would you have different advice for a Grand Lodge officer, or if you had the opportunity, a Grand Master?
Not really. And I think, and I come back to what I said earlier, I think time is the most important factor in becoming a Grand Lodge officer. Do you have the time to serve your Grand Lodge? There are expenses involved that will be your own, but time is the big factor.
One of the oldest and perhaps most painfully true observations is that hindsight is 20/20. You've had plenty of time for a lot of hindsight now, and if you had it all to do over again with regard to Masonry, is there anything you think you might do differently?
No.
I love a direct answer. That speaks well.
No, I really don't. Masonry has served me well. I've been happy with the ultimate attainment as Grand Master, and I'm just happy that a small town boy can achieve the highest office in Masonry in the state of Michigan, and I'm proud of that fact.
That would be a wonderfully high note to end this interview on, but I have to ask, is there anything else that you'd care to add?
The only thing I guess that I would care to add is all that's been said here today would not have been attainable without my wife, Donna. She's been my pillar, and I appreciate her love very much.
Grand Master, as ever, time is fleeting, and this brings to an end our time together here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother John, for the opportunity.